It started like any other night, but within minutes, the air in the Frost household turned heavy with words that would echo far beyond the walls of their home. The cameras were rolling, the mics were hot, and viewers could feel the storm brewing before the first clap of thunder. What began as a tense conversation quickly escalated into a shouting match that left Rasheeda in tears and Kirk leaning on a statement so sharp. Fans have not stopped talking about it. I made you famous, don't forget that. Imagine sitting across from the man you built your life and career with, only to hear him erase years of sacrifice in a single breath. The tension between Kirk and Rasheeda had been simmering for months, but no one expected it to spill over like this. Not on camera, not in front of the world. Rasheeda's face went pale, her lips trembled, and in that moment, the strong, composed woman fans admire seemed to shatter. She whispered, "How dare you?" before her voice broke, and Kirk's glare hardened even more. The room grew colder as silence cut through the argument. Producers exchanged worried glances. Family members tried to intervene, but Kirk wasn't backing down. He leaned forward, his voice dripping with frustration, insisting that without him, Rasheeda would never have become the woman the world now calls a star. Fans watching this explosive moment would later flood social media, debating whether Kirk was speaking the truth or lashing out in arrogance. Was it a confession of bitter pride? Or was it the raw truth finally clawing its way to the surface? One thing was clear. This wasn't just another argument between husband and wife. This was the unraveling of a partnership, a public fracture, in a marriage that had already endured betrayal, scandal, and heartbreak. As Rasheeda wiped her tears, trying to gather the strength to respond, the audience leaned in closer, bracing themselves for what would come next, because when love turns to resentment, the words said in anger can destroy everything. And tonight, Kirk Frost may have said the one thing Rasheeda will never forgive. The silence after Kirk's cutting words was deafening. The kind of silence that doesn't bring peace but slices deeper than the fight itself. Rasheeda's chest rose and fell, her eyes locked on Kirk as if searching for even a glimmer of remorse in his face. But Kirk didn't flinch. He leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like a man who had finally dropped a truth he had carried for too long. The cameras caught every second the flicker in Rasheeda's eyes, the way her jaw clenched to keep from breaking down, the trembling in her hands as if she wanted to throw something, anything, just to release the fury. What fans didn't know was that this wasn't just about fame or recognition. This was about years of suppressed anger, years of betrayal, and the weight of a marriage that seemed glamorous on the outside but had been cracking from within. You think you built this on your own? Kirk's voice cut through again, sharper, this time, the kind of tone that made everyone in the room shift uncomfortably. Without me pushing you, without me putting you out there, no one would even say your name today. His words weren't loud, but they carried venom. They hung in the air, poisoning every ounce of love that had once lived between them. Rasheeda's eyes welled, but it wasn't just sadness, it was insult, the kind of pain that burns hotter than any physical wound. She slammed her hand against the table, startling everyone. Don't you ever take away my grind, Kirk. Don't you ever strip me of my hard work. Her voice cracked, but the fire in her words made the room tremble. The producers whispered among themselves, one even signaling to cut the cameras, but Kirk threw up his hand. No, let it roll. Let them see the truth. Let the fans see who's really behind Rasheeda. His declaration was bold, almost taunting, and social media would later light up with divided opinions. Some fans would side with him, pointing out how Kirk had always managed her career, while others would rush to Rasheeda's defense, praising her independence and resilience. But in this moment, in that living room turned battlefield, there were no fans, no applause, no fame, just two broken people clashing over the ashes of their marriage. Rasheeda's voice lowered, almost trembling. You think I owe you everything? You think I should just bow down and say thank you every time I breathe? Kirk, I gave you my life. I gave you loyalty when you didn't deserve it. I gave you forgiveness when the world told me to walk away. Her words were drenched in hurt, each one a reminder of the scandals and betrayals Kirk had dragged her through. She looked at him like a woman who had finally run out of patience, like someone who had nothing left to give. Kirk shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping. Forgiveness. You stayed because you had nowhere else to go. Don't twist it. That laugh, that cruel dismissal, shattered something inside Rasheeda that had been holding on by a thread. She stood up, pacing the floor, her heels clicking like drumbeats of war. You are unbelievable. Do you even hear yourself? Do you realize how much damage you've done? And now you want to erase me like I'm some puppet you created. Her voice was rising, and every word was like a spark catching fire. Kirk, still seated, leaned forward, his eyes narrowing even more. Don't act like you're innocent. You love the spotlight, Rasheeda. You love the cameras, the attention, the fans. Who put that spotlight on you? Me, so yeah, I'll remind you every damn time if I have to. Her hand flew to her mouth, a sob threatening to escape, but she held it back. Instead, she stared him down with an intensity that could pierce through stone. You might have opened the door, Kirk, but I walked through it. And don't you dare forget I'm the one who kept walking when you tried to pull me down. Her words landed hard, the kind of retort that silenced even the background chatter of the crew. For a moment, Kirk had no comeback. For a moment, the arrogance on his face faltered. But only for a moment. He leaned back again, smirking, trying to regain control. Keep telling yourself that. The fight raged on, spilling into accusations from years past. Rasheeda brought up the nights she cried alone, the rumors she had to fight off, the humiliation she endured because of his wandering ways. Kirk shot back with claims that she only stayed because of the lifestyle he provided, that she wasn't strong enough to walk away. Their words were daggers, each strike cutting deeper than the last. The family, who had gathered in the next room, could hear everything. Kelsey, Kirk's daughter, stood frozen at the edge of the hallway, tears in her eyes as she watched her parents tear each other apart. She whispered to her brother, "They're never coming back from this." Her words carried a weight of truth that no one wanted to accept. Outside the house, fans who had caught wind of the argument through leaked audio began to gather. The news spread like wildfire across social media. Kirk and Rasheeda explosive fight caught on camera. Hashtags trended, clips went viral, and suddenly the world was a witness to the destruction of a marriage that had already been hanging by a thread. Friends called, some begging them to stop, others choosing sides, while enemies smirked, satisfied at the public unraveling. The Frosts were no longer just a family, they were a spectacle, and the flames of drama were consuming everything in their path. But the most chilling part wasn't what Kirk said. It wasn't even Rasheeda's tears. It was the look in her eyes when she finally stopped arguing. She sat back down, quiet, her face pale, her eyes empty. That silence was louder than any scream, heavier than any insult. Kirk looked at her, waiting for another outburst, but none came. She simply whispered, "You've already lost me, Kirk." The words hung there, not shouted, not screamed, but spoken with the finality of a woman who had given everything and had nothing left. Kirk froze. For the first time, his bravado cracked, his smirk faded. He didn't have a response. Because, deep down, he knew she meant it. And as the cameras zoomed in on that broken silence, the world leaned closer, hungry for what would happen next. In the hush that followed, the sound of the AC vent filled the room like a slow hiss, and all eyes stayed on Rasheeda. In this fictional dramatization, the glare of production lights washed everything flat, and the scene took on the stark look of a declaration carved in stone. She kept her hands folded in her lap, as if this was a courtroom, and the verdict had just been read. Kirk tried to swallow his way to a calmer look, but his jaw set hard. He kept his gaze steady, as if force alone could pull the words back into his mouth. It did not work. "You have not lost anything," he finally said, softer now, but his tone carried the same steel. "You have not lost me. You have not lost the brand. We are fine. You are overreacting." The word overreacting moved through the room like a match toward kindling. A producer shifted, ready to step in, but another held a palm out to wait. The cameras kept their red lights steady. Rasheeda lifted her chin and the old discipline returned to her posture. She had walked into studios when doors were barely cracked. She had smiled through comment sections that treated her like a headline instead of a human being. "I am not overreacting," she said, and her voice steadied on each syllable. "I am tired." The word landed with dull weight. She looked to the far corner where a framed photo of their wedding day sat by a candle that had burned so low the wick looked skeletal. "You think saying you made me is just a moment of heat," she continued, "but it is not. It is the root of how you move. Every choice comes with that claim under it." Kirk stood, almost offended by the sight of her speaking without tears. He took 2 measured steps and braced a hand on the back of a chair like a man about to argue a case. "I invested in you. I fought rooms for you. I took the smoke for both of us when people doubted." He drew in a breath and tried to reset. "If I say I helped build this, it is not a weapon. It is history." Rasheeda's eyes flashed with the old hurt that had learned to hide in plain sight. If it is history, then tell it right, she answered. Say I worked. Say I kept going when you were outside doing anything but guarding your house. Say I sang horse and sold clothes by hand when the store could not afford a clerk. Say all of that too. The hallway creaked. Kelsey had edged closer, and her brother hovered behind her. Family tends to move like tides in moments like these. Kirk clocked the kids in his periphery and tried to modulate his tone. We are not doing this in front of you, he told them, but the words were too late. They had already seen too much. We have been seeing it for years, Kelsey replied, voice unsteady, and then she lowered her eyes, as if ashamed of speaking. You always act like there is a scoreboard and you keep the numbers. The room tipped. Kirk let the chair go and took another step, palms open. I am still your father, he said, and the line carried a plea beneath the firmness. Do not make this into a public circus. A laugh, small and broken, escaped Rasheeda. You made it public the second you slipped pride into our vows, she said. A producer coughed. Another adjusted a headset and whispered about a break. The showrunner pressed 2 fingers against his temple, then shook his head. We stay, he mouthed, because this was the kind of raw that networks dream about. Fans are shocked when private lines are crossed. And the comments were already surging on a live stream because someone from the crew had fed a teaser to a friend. Emotions ran high beyond those walls as viewers debated who had the right to claim credit for a woman's career. Kirk reached for a safer posture. Let us be clear, he said with a manufactured calm. If I took a bow for what we built, that was wrong. I will own that. But the way you act like I am dead weight is not fair either. We moved as a team. A pause followed. It felt genuine at first. Then overplayed. Rasheeda tilted her head. If we are a team, why does it feel like every time I win, you ask for proof? He did not answer fast enough. The delay spoke louder than any line he could have delivered. The front door clicked. One of Rasheeda's closest friends stepped into the entryway with a careful look that read the temperature of the room. At once, she was part stylist, part confidant, part historian of battles no one else remembered, and she knew how to read the silence. She said nothing at first. She set down a garment bag and moved toward the kitchen like a witness taking her seat. Kirk exhaled. Great, he said. We are adding an audience. Rasheeda cut him a look that said the audience had been there long before this moment. The friend took out a phone and placed its screen down on the counter. The gesture made Kirk bristle. No recording. He shot across the island. The friend held up both hands. No one is recording, she replied, but the streets already are. Kirk stared at the phone as if it might spring open and spit poison. He rubbed his forehead and walked toward the window. Outside, beneath the hazy glow of a streetlight, a cluster of people stood with their chins up like sunflowers. Neighbors, curious passersby, and 3 or 4 fans who had driven over just for a chance at live drama. One held a handmade sign with a heart next to Rasheeda's name. Another wore a shirt with a vintage photo of the couple. The family was left divided, and you could see it mirrored in that small group on the sidewalk. Half of them shook their heads at Kirk's line about making her. Half swore he was only telling the truth no one wanted to hear. Rasheeda's friend went to the mantel and picked up a stack of slim, dusted notebooks, tied with twine. You remember these, she said, handing them to Rasheeda. Journals from before the first single popped. Set lists, budgets written on napkins. The calendar where you tracked every pop-up shop, every post, every shipment you packed. The pages smelled faintly of glue stick and old perfume. There were receipts taped down with handwritten notes, like proof of life. Rasheeda flipped to an entry with a ring-shaped coffee stain and read aloud without dramatics. 3 orders, today shipped in the rain. Still proud. She turned another page. Recorded 3 hooks, he did not come. She folded the book shut and looked at Kirk with a steady face that made him glance away. Do not turn this into an indictment, he said. Do not pretend I was nothing. He walked to the credenza and pulled open a drawer. He took out a folder thick with contracts and unflattering red pen scribbles. You want proof, he said, tapping the folder. I fought these deals. I kept sharks out. I took meetings until midnight while you slept. He let the folder drop onto the coffee table. The papers flared like wings and settled in a messy halo around a bowl of keys. The friend stood back, arms crossed, as if she knew the next twist. Needed room, it came with a vibration on her phone. She slid the screen awake and blanched a little. It is already out, she said, voice tight. A clip, 12 seconds. Him saying he made you, It is everywhere. Kirk's head snapped. Up from where? He demanded. She did not answer right away because the banner, the little river of comments, was moving so quickly it made her eyes ache. Fans were shocked. Some repeated the line, back with scorn. Some wrote long messages about long marriages and the quiet disrespect that eats at a partnership. A few said they agreed with him, then got shouted down by others who called them blind. Emotions ran high, and the thread piled into a mountain of heat. It worked like gravity. Every person who saw it felt pulled in. Rasheeda sat very still. There was power in the stillness. Turn off the stream, Kirk told the nearest producer. Cut it, I am serious. The producer looked at the showrunner. A decision bloomed and hardened in the same breath. We are not live, the showrunner lied with a calm face, which told everyone exactly how live they actually were. Kirk set his jaw again. You cannot air this without my sign-off. The showrunner spread his hands. Your contract says otherwise. The words floated like a small bomb. Rasheeda closed her eyes briefly, as if savoring a quiet she might not have again for hours. Her phone lit up with an old manager's name. She let it ring. Then another call buzzed. This time from Kirk's mother. She answered because mothers have a way of cutting through fog. Baby, the older woman said, voice thin with worry. What is happening in that house? There were years in that question. There were holidays and hospital rooms, and the way families patch holes with thread and prayer. We are okay, Rasheeda said, out of reflex, then let the truth out in a smaller voice. We are not okay. The older woman sighed. Do not let pride cost you your peace, she said, and do not let pride cost my son his family. She raised both of their stakes with one sentence. The line went quiet. Rasheeda blinked away a sting and thanked her, then ended the call before tears could smudge the moment. Kirk stared at his wife as if he could see the call's echo on her face. You told my mother we are not okay, he said. That is what you want. Sympathy. He was back in his stance again, the one where every word must be a chess move. I told her the truth, she answered. Something you keep shaping, to fit your pride? He took one step closer and lowered his voice into confession range. You think I do not see you, but I do. I see that you scaled a mountain while holding us on your back. I also see that you forget I was climbing too. He pulled at the thread of vulnerability for a few seconds, then let it go in favor of blame. The shift was plain. And it spoiled anything soft he had just said. The friend who had brought the journals cleared her throat and reached into her bag again. She drew out an old thumb drive inside a cracked plastic case. Found this in a storage bin, she said. Your first demos. From before the partnership had a logo. She held it up by the corner. Might be worth remembering how the fire started. Kirk gave a tight smile. Play them, he said. Half of what you call solo is my harmony under your lead. The friend lifted brows like, there it is. Rasheeda took the drive and walked it to the media cabinet. She slid it into a port and stepped back as the TV screen lit with a folder tree from another life. She clicked a file. A roomier, thinner voice came through the speakers, young enough to sound fearless and raw. There were missed notes and brave choices, then another file, and another. Some did carry Kirk's faint hum, and some did not. The point made itself, and still left room for debate, which is how most family truths live. The doorbell rang. The sound made everyone stiffen. The friend went to the door and checked the camera. A courier stood on the step with a slim envelope. She cracked the door, took the envelope, and shut it again. It was addressed to both of them in stark block letters. She handed it to Rasheeda, who broke the seal without flourish. Inside was a letter from a streaming platform's legal team. They were offering an exclusive with a hard angle. The pitch framed the fight as a limited series built around the making of a star and the breaking of a marriage. And it read like someone had turned their life into a logline without asking. A check figure sat at the bottom, enough to make anyone lean. But there was a clause that shifted the air at once. Creative control would sit with the platform and a showrunner who had no stake in anything but ratings. Kirk read over her shoulder. And all the blood rushed to his face. They think we will sell our worst night for a check, he said. The friend pointed at the number. They think you already did, she answered. The look he shot her could have drawn sparks. We did not sell, he said. We live on camera, that is not the same. Rasheeda folded the letter. Living on camera is not living, she said. It was simple and true, and too late. Another vibration. This time the friend's phone showed a message from a mutual contact in talent PR. She read it, then read it a second time because she did not believe it. There is a rumor, she said carefully. They say you pitched a solo doc a month ago, Kirk, about your rise from behind the scenes to the face of the company. She tried to soften it. They say you were going to call it The Architect. The name tilted the room like a floor had shifted. Kirk's eyes flashed in indignant light. A deck and a conversation. That is all it was, he said quickly. Nothing signed. Nothing real. He added too many words, and the extra weight bent his denial. Rasheeda folded her arms. So when you said you made me, you were rehearsing, she said. He blew air through his nose as if trying to put out a wildfire with breath alone. Or I was trying to get us more, he replied. A larger footprint. Bigger leverage. You think too small sometimes. The insult wore a fancy coat, but it was still an insult. Kelsey took one step into the room. Stop talking about footprints and leverage, she said. Talk about people. Talk about what the little ones will remember from tonight. She meant the siblings who looked up to both of them and who would someday scroll a clip that had become a family heirloom against everyone's wishes. Kirk's shoulders fell, then drew themselves up again. I will fix this, he said. I will call the show. I will call the platform. The friend tapped the legal letter. You cannot unring a bell, she said with a grim sort of kindness. You can only decide what song you sing next. A memory drifted in then, uninvited. It belonged to a cramped green room years back when Rasheeda had been booked at a small venue that forgot to pay its electric bill. She had performed by the blue glow of a soda machine and still met every fan afterward in a hallway that smelled like dust and sugar. That night she had looked at Kirk and said, if we ever get the light, we use it right. The promise returned now like a stray that still knew its name. She looked at him across a living room much bigger than that hallway. We are not using it right, she said. We turned it on each other. He ran a hand over his scalp and nodded once, then shook his head as if arguing with himself. You are not leaving, he said with weary certainty, and it sounded less like a command, and more like a wish. You can say whatever you want to these cameras, but you are not leaving. She stared at the floor, then up at him, then at the door. You lost me, she repeated, but the words were quieter now, more like accounting than rage. He took a step closer. Look at me, he said, and for a moment he did not sound like a producer, or a manager, or a man with a line to defend. He sounded like a husband surrounded by the wreckage of his own making. Look at me, he said again. She did. Then tell the truth, she said. Tell it plainly, stop performing, stop curating. Tell it like you would tell a god. The room held its breath. Kirk searched for clean sentences and found only edges. I am proud of you, he said first, and the admission had a slow ache in it. And I am afraid of you, he added, surprising himself as much as anyone. Afraid of how big you got without me. Afraid of being a footnote in your story when I am used to writing the captions. It was the most honest thing he had said all night, and it spilled out the way truths tend to, unpolished. Unplanned. Rasheeda blinked and some small weather crossed her face. It was not forgiveness, it was recognition. There it is, she whispered. That is the part that keeps making you swing. She set the journals on the table, palms braced on the covers like anchors. I cannot be small for you, she said. Not ever again. He nodded, once, twice, caught in a rhythm of grim agreement. Then pride, stubborn as rust, reappeared. Then do not ask me to be invisible either, he said. Do not act like I did not help stack bricks. She gave a tight nod that held both truth and boundary. Help is not ownership, she said. Help is not a debt that never ends. The showrunner stepped in then, voice low, offering a break and a reset. We can pick up after you both breathe, he said. We can reframe. Kirk waved him away. No reframing, he said. Leave it as it is. The producer blinked. You are sure? He asked, because this was the kind of certainty that could define a season. Kirk glanced at Rasheeda. I am sure, he said. She watched him, silent, trying to decide whether this sudden openness was a real turn or a new act. A car slowed in front of the house. The lights washed across the curtains like a brief sunrise, then died. Tires whispered against pavement. The doorbell rang again, a simple tone that felt heavy now. The friend checked the camera and sucked in a breath. It is your lawyer, she said to Rasheeda. And she is not alone. Another figure stood just off to the side, hidden by the stoop light's shadow. The friend frowned at the shape, then looked back to the couple. Do you want me to send them away? She asked. Already knowing the answer. "Let them in," Rasheeda said after a stretch of quiet that felt like a page turning. She adjusted her shoulders, gathered the journals, and stood. Kirk remained, rooted for a heartbeat longer, then stepped back to make space. As if the house itself had shifted from shared to contested ground. When the latch clicked and the door opened, cool night air slipped in around the edges, carrying the faint sound of phones buzzing out on the sidewalk and the low murmur of a city that had learned to feed on story. The lawyer stepped through, with a slim briefcase, and the other figure moved with her, face still in shadow. For a beat, no one spoke. The red lights on the cameras burned steady. The next twist hung in the doorway like weather about to break. The lawyer stepped forward first, heels clicking against the polished floor, her briefcase snapping open like the start of a trial. She greeted no one with warmth. Her tone was sharp, practical, the voice of someone who carried other people's secrets for a living. "We need to discuss damage control immediately," she said, her eyes darting toward the cameras, then back at Rasheeda. The second figure shifted into the light, and the room gasped. It wasn't a stranger, it was Jasmine. Her presence cut through the atmosphere like glass shattering on tile. Rasheeda's spine stiffened, her hand instinctively rising to her chest. "You brought her here." Her voice cracked into disbelief, almost a growl. Kirk's eyes flared, wide, but his lips pressed together, unable to hide the guilt that flickered across his face. Jasmine, dressed sleek in black, hair tied back like she came prepared for a showdown, smirked faintly. "I didn't come here for him," she said, coldly, "I came here for the truth. And since the whole world is watching, maybe it's time everybody hears it." The crew froze. The showrunner made a slicing motion across his throat to cut the feed, but no one moved fast enough. The cameras stayed hot, red lights glowing like hungry eyes. The lawyer frowned, snapping her briefcase shut. "This isn't part of the plan," she muttered, but her words were drowned by Rasheeda's sharp laugh, one of those laughs laced with fury. "The truth. You wouldn't know the truth if it crawled into your bed." "Oh wait, maybe you would." The words were daggers, and Jasmine didn't flinch. Instead, she tilted her head, lips curling. "Funny, because the bed I crawled into wasn't mine. It was his." Gasps rippled through the room. Kirk stepped forward, holding up both hands like a man trying to contain an explosion. "Enough." His voice cracked with desperation, but his command held no weight. Jasmine's eyes narrowed at him. "Don't play the victim now. You opened the door. You put me in this story." The fans outside, catching snippets through livestream leaks, began chanting louder. Some shouted Rasheeda's name like a prayer. Others screamed at Jasmine as though their voices could pierce through walls. The family was left divided, and now the public was split too, lines drawn like battlefronts. Rasheeda's tears returned. But this time they didn't weaken her, they sharpened her. She turned to Kirk, voice shaking but strong. "This is who you chose to bring into our lives. This is your legacy." Her words cut deep, echoing louder than Jasmine's smirk. Kirk shook his head, stumbling over excuses. It wasn't supposed to go this far, but Jasmine cut him off. "It always goes this far when you lie." She stepped closer, her presence magnetic and dangerous. "He told me I made him feel alive again. That without me, he was just a shadow. So before you scream at me, ask yourself what kind of man needs another woman to remind him he still matters." The room erupted. Rasheeda lunged forward, restrained by her friend, her voice raw with pain. "You're nothing but a parasite, Jasmine, feeding off scraps of what I built." Jasmine didn't blink. She whispered low, so only Kirk and Rasheeda could hear, but the boom mics caught every syllable. "Parasite or not, at least I didn't forget to remind him he still existed." The line was poison. Rasheeda froze, the insult digging under her skin. Kirk looked torn in half, his face etched with panic. Fans watching from their phones clutched their screens, emotions running high. Unsure if they were witnessing a marriage crumbling or a war spilling into full collapse. The lawyer raised her voice, trying to cut through the chaos. "If you don't all calm down right now, this will end careers. Not just reputations careers," but her warning fell flat against the roar of personal betrayal filling the room. Jasmine folded her arms, unbothered, as if she had already won by simply showing up. Rasheeda's voice trembled with rage. "You can keep him," she spat. "But understand this, I made myself. And the whole world knows it now." The declaration landed like thunder, shaking even Kirk. And yet, before anyone could answer, a knock thundered on the door again, louder this time. The friend rushed to the peephole and turned pale. "It's the press," she whispered. "They're here. Cameras, lights, the whole circus." Everyone froze, breaths held, as the weight of reality crashed down. Inside, betrayal burned like fire. Outside, the world was ready to devour whatever came next, and the Frost house stood on the edge of implosion. The pounding at the door grew louder, steady and demanding, until it felt less like a knock and more like a drumbeat announcing the start of war. The Frost household was no longer a home, it was a stage, and outside, the audience was swelling by the second. Rasheeda's friend pressed her back against the door, as if her body alone could keep the frenzy at bay. "They're everywhere," she whispered, her voice trembling. "News vans, local reporters, bloggers, half the city must be out there." The windows flickered with the strobe of camera flashes, the muffled sound of voices chanting Rasheeda's name rising above the night air. Rasheeda closed her eyes, taking in a shaky breath. It was the sound of strangers crying out for her, but it didn't bring comfort. It felt like the walls were closing in, her private heartbreak now a national headline. Kirk, still shaken, rubbed his temples. "This is out of control," he muttered. "They weren't supposed to." His words faltered as another roar erupted outside, fans chanting, "Rasheeda, Rasheeda," louder than ever. The family was left divided, but the crowd had already chosen its queen. Jasmine smirked, stepping into the glow of the living room lights like a villain basking in the spotlight. "Looks like the people have spoken," she said coolly. "But don't get too comfortable, Rasheeda. Crowds turn fast. They'll eat you alive the second they smell weakness." Rasheeda's eyes snapped open, fire cutting through her tears. "And you think you'll take my place? You think fans will ever respect the woman who broke a family apart?" Her voice rose with raw conviction. "No, they'll never cheer for you. You'll always be a shadow in my story." The words stung Jasmine, but she masked it with another smirk. Kirk finally exploded, voice booming. "Enough. Both of you." He slammed his fist onto the table, rattling glasses, startling even the crew. His chest heaved, sweat glistening under the production lights. "Do you hear yourselves? You're tearing this family to shreds and handing the world the pieces to laugh at." But even as he shouted, there was no mistaking the guilt in his tone. He had lit the match. He had opened the door. And now, the fire was raging out of control. Rasheeda turned on him, her voice sharp and trembling. "Don't you dare act like the victim now, Kirk. You brought her here. You fed her lies. You made me the fool, and now you want pity." She stepped closer, jabbing a finger into his chest. "You wanted the world to see the truth. Well, here it is. They see you for the man who destroyed his own family." Before Kirk could respond, the front door suddenly burst open. The press had forced their way in, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward like weapons. Reporters shouted over each other. "Rasheeda, are you leaving Kirk for good? Kirk, did you really say you made her famous? Jasmine, what's your role in all this?" The living room erupted into chaos, the line between reality and spectacle erased in an instant. Rasheeda's children cried out, rushing toward the hallway, terrified by the swarm of strangers invading their home. Kelsey tried to shield her younger siblings, screaming at the reporters to get out, her voice breaking under the weight of fear and anger. The crew panicked, some trying to push cameras back, others still filming, unwilling to miss the most explosive footage of the season. The family was under siege, and the walls of their sanctuary had crumbled. Through it all, Rasheeda stood frozen, the flashes of light reflecting in her tear-streaked face. She looked like a queen stripped bare, betrayed in front of the world yet refusing to bow. Finally, she raised her hand and shouted, her voice cutting through the noise, "Get out. Every single one of you." The command carried power, enough to still the room for just a moment. Reporters hesitated, cameras lowered, and even Jasmine fell silent, her smirk finally slipping. Kirk looked at Rasheeda then, really looked at her not as the woman he once controlled, not as the partner he resented, but as someone who had taken everything he had thrown at her and still stood tall. For a brief flicker, pride melted into shame. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Rasheeda whispered so softly the microphones barely caught it, "This is the end, Kirk. I can't do this anymore." And with those words, she turned, walking toward the stairs, leaving the chaos behind. Fans outside roared louder, chants echoing into the night. Inside, Kirk was left standing in the ruins of his own making, the cameras capturing every ounce of his regret. Jasmine shifted uncomfortably, realizing the crowd's fury had shifted toward her, boos echoing through the glass. The lawyer shook her head, muttering, "Careers are ending tonight." But in that silence after Rasheeda disappeared upstairs, one truth was undeniable. The marriage that had weathered years of storms had finally broken, and the world had front row seats to the upstairs. The sound of Rasheeda's heels striking against the hardwood echoed like a countdown. Every step felt final, every breath heavier than the last. She shut the bedroom door with a firm push, muffling the chaos below. Alone, she leaned against the dresser, trembling hands gripping the edge. Her reflection in the mirror looked foreign, eyes red, makeup streaked, but still carrying that unshakable steel fans admired. She whispered to herself, "Enough. I'm done." It wasn't for the cameras, it wasn't for the fans. It was for her. Downstairs, the circus hadn't ended. Reporters still lingered, voices clashing as producers scrambled to regain control. Kirk stood in the middle of it, shoulders slumped, sweat beading down his face. For once, he had no lines left, no clever deflections. Jasmine hovered near the wall, arms folded, pretending the hostility rolling off the crowd didn't faze her. But outside, the chants had turned sharp, no longer celebratory, but condemning. "Rasheeda deserves better. Kirk is cancelled. Jasmine, go home." The noise filtered through the windows, drowning out his thoughts. Kelsey stormed forward, eyes blazing with fury at her father. "Do you see what you've done?" she snapped, her voice carrying over the chaos. "You've embarrassed us. You've humiliated Mom. And for what? Your pride. Your ego." Kirk's face fell, and for a moment, the man who always strutted with arrogance looked small, cornered by the very people he claimed to lead. The family was left divided, but Kelsey's words struck him deeper than Rasheeda's had. The lawyer tugged at his arm. "We need to move you out of here. The optics are catastrophic." But Kirk pulled away, shaking his head. "No, I'm not running." His voice cracked, more out of desperation than courage. He looked up toward the stairs, as if waiting for Rasheeda to come back down, as if a part of him still believed she would. But she didn't. Instead, the creak of the steps signaled something else. Rasheeda descended slowly, suitcase in hand, her friend trailing behind her with the journals and a coat draped over one arm. The cameras zoomed in tight, every eye in the room locked on her. She looked regal despite the devastation, walking through the wreckage with grace. The chants outside grew deafening, fans cheering her name like a battle cry. Kirk's eyes widened, his voice breaking. "Rasheeda, please." He reached out, but she didn't flinch, didn't pause. She stopped just short of him, suitcase at her side, eyes steady. "You told me not to forget you made me," she said coldly. "But tonight, the world saw the truth. I made myself. And now, I'm setting myself free." Gasps rippled across the room. Jasmine's smirk finally faded, replaced with unease. The lawyer muttered something under her breath about contracts and settlements, but no one listened. The children clung to each other, tears streaking their faces as the gravity of the moment sank in. Kirk dropped to his knees, a man stripped of power, begging not with words but with his broken expression. Yet Rasheeda's eyes didn't soften. She turned, suitcase in hand, and walked through the sea of cameras, flashes exploding like fireworks. Outside, the crowd erupted as she stepped onto the porch. Fans screamed her name, voices carrying like thunder across the neighborhood. Some held signs of support, others live-streamed, their phones raised high to capture history in real time. Emotions ran high, the energy electric, as Rasheeda lifted her chin, eyes glistening but unyielding. Kirk appeared in the doorway behind her, but his presence was drowned out by the jeers and boos. He tried to call after her, but his words were lost in the chaos. Jasmine stayed inside, frozen in place. Realizing she had miscalculated, there was no victory in standing next to a man the world now viewed as broken. The family was fractured, the empire shaken, but Rasheeda walked down those steps with her dignity intact. Her children's cheers mingling with the fans outside. The cameras followed her every move as she slid into a waiting car. The door shutting softly yet echoing louder than any fight. The vehicle pulled away slowly, headlights cutting through the night, leaving Kirk alone in the doorway of his crumbling world. He stood there, shoulders hunched, watching as the love of his life disappeared into the distance. And for the first time in years, there was no bravado, no smirk, only silence. Back inside, the lawyer packed her briefcase in frustration. "This will take years to fix," she said flatly. Jasmine, now pale and unsettled, slipped out the back door, unwilling to face the wrath outside. The producers huddled together, whispering about ratings, spin, and the season finale that had just written itself. But the cameras lingered on Kirk, still rooted in the doorway, tears threatening but never falling. The man who once claimed he made Rasheeda famous now faced the harsh reality. She didn't need him anymore, and as the lights of her car faded down the street, fans watching around the world knew they had just witnessed the end of an era. A marriage, defined by scandal, betrayal, and resilience had finally snapped. The Frosts were no longer a couple, they were a cautionary tale, and the family was left divided. Forever marked by the night, Kirk told Rasheeda the one thing she would never forgive. What a night, what a fall. What the world just witnessed was more than a marital argument, it was the public unraveling of a relationship that once seemed unbreakable. Kirk Frost stood in his own doorway, a man stripped of pride. While Rasheeda walked away with her dignity intact, suitcase in hand, the roar of her fans carrying her into a new chapter. Jasmine's smirk melted into silence, the lawyer muttered about reputations in ashes, and the children, caught in the middle, will never forget the night their family shattered in front of cameras and strangers. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and the Frost household was left divided like never before. Some viewers argue Kirk only voiced the truth, that he had a hand in building Rasheeda's empire. Others insist his arrogance finally cost him everything. Social media is split. In two, half praising Rasheeda for standing tall, half debating if Kirk's confession was pride or desperation, and Jasmine, her presence only added fuel to an already raging fire. But the biggest question remains. Is this really the end? Can a marriage that has survived scandals, betrayals, and public scrutiny come back from this breaking point? Or has Kirk Frost finally said the one thing Rasheeda can never forgive? Only time will tell, but tonight's events will echo far beyond these walls. Now we want to hear from you. Do you think Rasheeda is gone for good? Was Kirk telling a painful truth or just lashing out to wound her? And where does Jasmine fit into this tangled story, victim, villain, or opportunist? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit that like button if you were just as stunned by tonight's drama, and subscribe so you don't miss the next shocking twist. Because if this explosive fight taught us anything, it's that when it comes to the Frost family, the story is never really over.